Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
I heard the clink first, a tiny metallic sound as the ring struck porcelain and spun for half a second before vanishing into the water. I didn't pause. I flushed immediately, my hand steady on the lever, eyes dry, mind focused. No tears, no trembling. Just that smooth, deliberate action, like a surgeon making the first incision. Strange how a single object can hold so many years of loyalty, promises, even illusions. But it took only a second to wash it away. It reminded me of the exact moment I first felt genuine disgust, real and toxic, lodged in the back of my throat. That day, everything changed. A man always hopes he'll never have to see the ugliness behind the person he thought he knew best. But once you see it, it's impossible to unsee. I'm David Parker. I used to be a decent husband, or so I believed. It's funny how illusions work. I was one of those men who said, I trust my wife completely, proud of my open heart, my unwavering belief in her. Maybe that was my first mistake. Because by the time I realized I was dealing with betrayal, it was already too late. And as I stared into that swirling water, I felt no regret for what I'd just done. It began the night I recognized that nagging taste of revulsion every time she kissed me. The awareness crept in like mold in a dark corner, silent and insidious. One afternoon, we were in the bedroom. She had come home from shopping. Some new outfit she was too happy to show off. She stepped out of her jeans, humming some tune under her breath, nothing unusual. But I sensed something off. The faintest whiff of cologne in the air that wasn't mine. A shift in her posture. A guilt-laden aura that lingered in the way she tossed her hair. Maybe it was the detail of how she was so quick to shower, or how she carefully avoided meeting my eyes. I asked her, "Where'd you go after the store?" She turned her head to me and said, "Just the store," with that bright, practiced smile. Nothing more. I nodded, forced a grin, and let it go. But that was the seed. The moment I couldn't push aside the feeling that something in my own home was decaying under the surface. She was Caitlin, the woman I married over a decade ago, a dreamer with big brown eyes and an easy laugh. In those days, I fell for her warmth, her creativity. She had an entire library on her phone, loved to write, to talk, to connect with people. She used to read poetry out loud in bed. Now I was hearing an off-key melody, like someone playing a beautiful song, but missing the main notes. The shift in her tone, the repeated mention of an old friend from her university days. Innocent references at first. He was my professor, you know, just a mentor. We kept in touch. We might grab coffee next week if he's in town. She never actually said his name. Or maybe she did, and I just wasn't paying attention. But my memory caught it eventually. Arthur. I didn't fling accusations. Instead, I found a calm, clinical approach. That was my second mistake, believing that by staying rational, I could preserve something that was already lost. We men like to believe logic is our ally, but logic is powerless against the raw, primal grip of betrayal. Caitlin had a work event coming up, a corporate quiz night/networking dinner. Something sponsored by the online media company she wrote for. She insisted I go with her, said it would be fun, that we could mingle, maybe spark some new professional contact for me. I agreed. That night, I put on a pair of black slacks, a blue button-down, and a forced smile. We arrived to a modestly lit banquet hall, the hum of conversation mingling with the jazz band in the corner. Small clusters of people stood around high tables, sipping cocktails, trading pleasantries. I felt her grip tighten on my arm when we entered. I tried not to read too much into it, but I caught her eyes scanning the room. She stiffened, and there he was, Arthur Wallace. Tall, confident, a man with a casual command of the space around him. He was leaning by the bar, swirling a tumbler of whiskey, flashing a look that said, "I've seen and done enough not to be impressed by any of this." He spotted us, smiled that comfortable, slow smile of an insider. She didn't have to introduce him. Something in my gut told me exactly who he was. At that moment, my stomach curled. It was worse than seeing a random man look at my wife with desire. It was the sudden understanding that she had allowed that look. He greeted her with warmth, a gentle press of his hand on her elbow. And she responded with a flicker in her eyes, an almost imperceptible spark, like an electric current that passed between them. She turned to me, a formal introduction. "David, this is Arthur, my old professor." I shook his hand. He gave me a polite nod. "I've heard a lot about you," he said. His voice was smooth, well modulated. Later, I'd remember that voice, how he measured each word, almost academically. Back then, I only thought, this is a man who's learned to seduce with conversation alone. We chatted, or rather, they chatted. He asked about her writing, about her passions, referencing old inside jokes from the university. She giggled, running a hand through her hair. My presence felt superfluous. Yet, I forced myself to watch, to store every detail in my memory. That was step one of my quiet vengeance, gathering the evidence, not just what was happening, but how it made me feel. Because if I started raging, I'd reveal my strategy too early. Instead, I locked it all inside. The quiz part of the evening was silly, teams answering random trivia questions. I joined Caitlin's group, Arthur included. The host bantered, told jokes. Some people half listened as they drank. I studied them. How he'd lean in close to her when she whispered an answer. How she'd laugh at his every remark. Once, the host quipped something about secret romances. Arthur glanced at Caitlin with an almost invisible smirk. She pretended not to see it, but I caught the slight blush in her cheeks. Inside, I felt that vile churn again, the same bitterness that had lodged in my throat. I wanted to tear him apart right there, to grab him by the collar. But that was not the plan. The plan was not about physical violence. This was about killing trust in 3 distinct moves, letting her watch and feel the collapse she had orchestrated. Rage can be a bright flame that devours everything in one burst. But I chose the scalpel. After the quiz, we ended up at the bar. Arthur leaned over to me, smiling in that friendly way. "Your wife has always been brilliant," he said. "She was my best student. Her first novel. Well, you must know all about that." Then he paused. "She never mentioned it to you." A rhetorical question. I could see it in his eyes. He already knew the answer. And I realized I'd never heard about any first novel. She told me she dabbled in short stories, that she'd never finished anything significant. That small detail felt like a coded message. She shared with him what she hadn't shared with me. His gaze flickered to her. My wife lowered her eyes, then brushed imaginary lint off her skirt. I felt pinned, cornered, like an outsider. So, that was it. They had secrets. Her secrets from me. Their talk about literature, about her creative spark, about that first novel he probably guided, line by line, in the hush of some dimly lit library. I had no illusions left. In that moment, I recognized. My marriage was a facade. That's when I turned away, left them standing there. She stared after me, but I needed air. I stepped out onto a small terrace, the night breeze cutting across my face. Strangely, it calmed me. I pulled my phone from my pocket, stared at the blank screen as if it might show me an answer. But there was nothing, no message from the universe. A few minutes later, I found Caitlin leaning against the railing. She said softly, "He's a friend, David. I'm sorry if it looked strange. I didn't mean." I interrupted. "You never told me about your first novel." She froze. Then, in a barely audible whisper, she said, "It was nothing." I dropped it. He just liked praising it to show off. "It's in the past." I nodded. That was enough for me. I'd made my decision. We went back inside, pretending to have a perfectly normal evening. People drank, laughed. The corporate host started giving out small prizes, a half-hearted ceremony. One was a gift certificate to a local psychiatric clinic, a random door prize. A comedic gag, the host joked. Everyone cheered. The irony didn't escape me. I kept an eye on them, Arthur and Caitlin. No open flirting, no big gestures, but the tension was there. When he looked at her, it was with an unsettling familiarity, the memory of a bed shared in laughter, or the afterglow of some stolen moment. My jaw tightened, another swirl of that bitterness. But I refused to break. Step 2 was about letting the tension mount, giving her no reason to suspect I knew everything. Then, the moment I dreaded. I decided to gather more confirmation, so I slipped away quietly, searching. The hotel had a second floor with small conference rooms, deserted. My intuition guided me. Some men claim a sixth sense, but it's really just noticing patterns, micro-expressions, the simplest detail of who's absent. Caitlin was gone from the main hall. So was Arthur. My hand was cold as I turned a corner, hearing hushed voices. Then, behind a half-shut door, I saw enough to end any last thread of denial. He had his arms around her waist, lips on her neck. Her hand slid under his suit jacket, and her breathy exhale ignited the space between them. She whispered, "We shouldn't," but her tone said otherwise. He murmured something in her ear that I couldn't catch, something low and urgent. She clung to him. They kissed in a way that told me this was not their first time. Her body arched against his. Their mouths were wet, gasping. A single moan from her cut through my chest like a scalpel. Not a dream, not an accidental brush of lips. This was them, locked in the kind of intimacy she'd once reserved for me alone. I stood, silent, observing. My heart pounded so loud I swore they could hear it. Yet they were absorbed in each other, locked in that stolen moment. Some men might have screamed, thrown the door open, unleashed a torrent of rage. But I didn't. Instead, I memorized every detail. The flush in her cheeks, the frantic movement of her hands, the way she broke away briefly, eyes glistening with both excitement and fear, then dove back in. That was my final piece of evidence. No more illusions. I walked away, the third step in my plan forming in my head. Killing trust demanded I let her feel me slipping from her world, quietly and irreversibly, so she'd watch her life collapse. If you scream, you give them reason to defend themselves. If you weep, they feed on your weakness. But if you remain cold and methodical, it's terrifying. Eventually, I rejoined the crowd, answered some random coworker's question about marketing trends, pretended everything was fine. Inside, I was tearing, but I'd learned to compartmentalize. Something in me realized the final strike had to be done with precision. When the event ended, we all applauded the winners of the silly trivia game. Arthur was one of them. Ironically, the host handed him a cheap little golden trophy. People laughed. My wife clapped politely, avoiding my eyes. Then, as everyone gathered their coats, I found myself beside Arthur again. He sipped the last of his whiskey. Our gazes met. Behind the polite facade, something in him flickered, like a predator acknowledging another apex creature. Or maybe he was just testing my reaction. I gave him nothing. I turned to Caitlin and said calmly, "Let's go. It's late." She followed me, silent. Out in the parking lot, the hush between us was stifling. She tried to speak once or twice, but couldn't form words. In the car, I gripped the wheel until my knuckles whitened. She fiddled with her phone, chewing her lip, eyes darting to me. I said nothing. Not yet. That night, she slipped into bed. I lay beside her for what felt like hours, hearing her breathing, waiting for her to fall asleep. My mind replayed them in that hidden room. Her moan, the press of their bodies. I stared at the ceiling in the darkness, feeling the black hole in my gut expand. Eventually, I drifted off into a restless half-sleep, haunted by images of them intertwined. Morning came, and so did the time for confrontation. She found me in the kitchen, coffee in hand, my face calm. She stepped in, hesitating. "David," she began softly. I put my mug down. "Don't," I said, voice steady. "I saw you. Upstairs, behind the conference room. I sought everything. She froze, color draining from her face. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. Then, quietly, in a trembling voice, she tried to deny it. That's when I repeated her own words from the past, her vow, spoken years ago, after we had a minor marriage conflict. You once said, "I would never hide secrets from you, David. If anything is wrong, we'll face it together. Remember that." My words were like shards of glass, each syllable cutting deeper. She bowed her head. No real denial came, just a whisper of, "I'm sorry." I studied her. Part of me wanted to destroy something, break plates, hurl accusations, but the colder part, the calculating part, kept me anchored. I let the silence grow, let her see that pitiless emptiness in my stare. "How long?" I asked at last. She tried to speak, coughed, tried again. "A few months. It just happened." We stayed in touch, then he came to town. "Stop." My voice was low, but full of a threat more potent than shouting. "You told me we'd always be honest, and you took that first novel to him, never to me. You gave him your secrets and your body. And you let me walk around believing we were still a team." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. She was living out the script she must have rehearsed for this day. Cry, apologize, claim confusion. But I was no longer open to her performance. She reached out to touch my arm. I stepped back. That single motion crushed her. She realized how far gone I was, how I was refusing to give her the emotional meltdown she might have expected. My quietness scared her more than any rage would have. She tried to defend her choices. "Arthur, he understands parts of me I've kept hidden for so long. My writing, my aspirations. I love you, David, but sometimes you don't see me. We lost ourselves in routine, in responsibilities. I never wanted to hurt you." I recalled a promise she made to me back when we were still engaged. She'd said, "If I ever betray you, I'd rather you hate me than pity me." So I gave her the hate, in the most controlled form possible. "You love me," I repeated, voice ice cold. "Your definition of love is interesting. You took vows, then twisted them the minute you needed an emotional thrill from a man who understands you. That's not confusion, Caitlin. It's a choice." She looked down at her feet, tears slipping down her cheeks, but she had no answer. We stared at each other. In that moment, I remembered how I used to hold her after nightmares, how I once nursed her through that tragedy with our lost child. This was the same woman, and yet someone else entirely. My heart pounded, but outwardly, I was the stone-faced surgeon dissecting the marriage inch by inch. Finally, I said, "I need space." Without waiting for her reply, I left. I took my car and drove aimlessly for an hour, letting the city blur. My phone buzzed with her messages, but I ignored them. I had to finalize the last step. There was a small diner on the outskirts of Boston I used to frequent. I stopped there, slid into a booth, ordered black coffee. My mind was methodical, reviewing the plan. Step 1. Gather the evidence. Done. Step 2. Let the tension grow in her mind, so she sees the monstrous silhouette of my hurt. Done. Step 3. Deliver the final blow. Destroy what remains of our trust in a swift, irrevocable gesture. I mulled over how exactly to execute it. I sipped coffee, wrote a few notes on a napkin. Then an idea came to me. She'd become an empty shell if I severed all ties that same day. Part of me wanted to vanish, leave her with no closure. But I decided on something more surgical. I wanted her to know that I'd considered everything, that I was in control. So I chose a moment that would echo for a lifetime. The corporate holiday party was about a week away. She was invited. I knew from the event email that had popped up on her phone. A bigger affair than that quiz night, with more people, more pomp. Arthur would likely attend. And I planned to be there to finalize the end. Maybe it was petty, but it felt right. I wanted an audience, or at least the sense that she couldn't hide. That last piece of humiliation, or maybe the first piece of my new beginning. For the next few days, I moved through the house like a stranger. I slept in the guest room, didn't speak much, didn't fight. She tried to approach me once or twice, begging for a conversation. "David, please, I just want to talk about." I cut her off each time with the same calm phrase, "We'll talk. Just wait." She probably expected me to shout, to throw things, or to demand a divorce. But I gave her this dreadful limbo, forced her to live alongside the knowledge that I'd seen her in another man's arms, that I'd lost all respect for her. And I still wasn't telling her how or when it would end. She walked on eggshells, tears always close. She was crumbling. And deep inside, part of me was quietly satisfied at her suffering. I never claimed to be noble. The day of the holiday party arrived. I dressed in a crisp suit, the same one I wore to her mother's funeral. There was something symbolic in that. She asked if we would drive together. I said, "Of course. We're still married, aren't we?" My voice made her flinch. At the venue, elaborate decorations sparkled under warm lights. Waiters offered champagne flutes. People milled around, wearing forced holiday cheer. I recognized some faces from her writing circles, from her occasional freelance gigs. We moved as a unit, but not close, like two strangers who happened to occupy the same space. She spotted Arthur early on. He was by the buffet, talking to a small group. His eyes flicked to us. A moment of tension. Then a polite nod. Caitlin stiffened beside me. I could sense the conflict in her. Fear, guilt, maybe residual longing. It was almost painful to watch. We navigated the standard holiday pleasantries. A coworker asked how we were. I gave generic answers. Caitlin tried to muster a smile. Arthur eventually drifted closer, greeting others, collecting a whiskey from the bar. I overheard him flirting with one of the female staff, speaking in that charming, intellectual tone. If Caitlin felt jealousy, I didn't see it. Maybe she was too consumed by fear of what I might do. Toward the end of the evening, they announced a final raffle. Prizes ranged from gift baskets to random coupons for local spas, restaurants, and that mental health certificate I remembered from the quiz night. The host called out, and the winner of a gift certificate for a free psychiatric consultation is Mrs. Caitlin Parker. "Congratulations, Caitlin." Scattered applause. She looked around, surprised, a forced smile twisting her lips as she took the envelope. The host grinned, "Use it well, or gift it to a friend, haha." The crowd politely laughed. That was my cue. I approached, took the microphone from the host, ignoring his baffled expression. I had already planned this. My voice was eerily steady as I said, "Caitlin, my dear wife, might I say something?" The room quieted. She stood frozen. Arthur's eyes narrowed. I stepped close, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, felt her tense under my touch. Then I said calmly into the microphone, "You remember that line you used to tell me? If we ever drift apart, please, let me know before it's too late." Well, it's too late. I took the certificate from her hands. The host, sensing drama, tried to intervene, but I ignored him. I continued, "I believe you need this more than anyone else tonight. I'm sure the doctor can help you sort out your priorities." A hush fell over the crowd. I could feel their stares, the shock. Some looked away, uneasy. Caitlin's face crumpled with a painful mix of shame and heartbreak. Tears brimmed in her eyes. Arthur shifted behind her, as if wanting to step in. But he didn't. That moment hung in the air like a blade waiting to drop. Then I turned, gave the microphone back, and walked away. People parted before me, uncertain how to react. She came after me, face streaked with tears, trying to explain or defend herself. But I had no words left for her. My final blow had been delivered, in front of everyone who ever thought we were a perfect couple. In that public space, I had burned the remains of her facade. As I stepped outside into the crisp winter night, I heard her footsteps behind me. She grabbed my arm. "David, please," she sobbed. "Don't leave like this. I'm sorry. I never wanted. I pulled an envelope from my pocket. Not the certificate, but a different piece of paper. "This is a letter from a lawyer," I said, handing it to her. "I suggest you read it carefully. I'll give you until the end of the month to move out of our home. Meanwhile, I'll be staying in a hotel. I want no contact unless it concerns legalities." My voice was unwavering. "You taught me something valuable, Caitlin, that illusions can break without warning. Consider this your closure." Her tears spilled over, and she tried to form words that never came. Then I brushed past her, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. The doorman gave me a startled look but said nothing. I got into my car, started the engine, and stared at the steering wheel. My reflection in the rearview mirror showed a man I barely recognized, steeled, pale, eyes full of quiet devastation, and yet I was satisfied. That same night, I drove to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. I tossed my suitcase on the bed, sank into a rickety chair, and exhaled, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. I'd done it. I'd killed our trust in a precise, three-step operation, and the aftermath was heartbreak, for both of us, or for all three if you counted Arthur, though I suspected he'd carry on just fine, devouring the next knave soul. In the flickering light of a single lamp, I realized that behind my cold facade was an aching emptiness. Maybe that was the price of my brand of revenge. The ring, I thought. The ring still clung to my finger, the symbol of a vow now meaningless. I twisted it off, stared at the dull shine of the metal. That moment of reflection lasted a good long while. I could see memories. Our wedding day, her laughter, the nights we'd spend just talking about silly future dreams. A part of me wanted to keep those illusions, but illusions are illusions. Standing up abruptly, I headed for the cramped motel bathroom. I lifted the lid on the toilet, felt the weight of the ring in my palm, heard the shaky breath in my chest. "We once said forever," I murmured, remembering the exact intonation she used. Then, with a flick of my wrist, I dropped it. The faint clink echoed in the small space. I flushed, watching it swirl into oblivion. No second thoughts. The swirl calmed, and I stared at the water, at the empty space where the ring used to be. That circle of gold had once symbolized everything. Our love, our promise, the idea that we had each other's backs. Now it was gone. Sitting back on the bed, I let out a long exhale and closed my eyes. My mind replayed images of the corporate quiz night, the hush of that side room, her face as she kissed Arthur. A wave of nausea and finality overcame me. I leaned over my knees, hands clasped, remembering the old Caitlin who would say, "I need you, David. I can't imagine life without you." Maybe she told the truth then, or maybe that was a convenient lie. I'd never know. She'd become a stranger, and I was forced to cut her out like a malignant cell. For a few days, I lived in that motel, ignoring messages. She called, texted, left voicemails. I deleted them all unread. I needed isolation to figure out who I was now, to exorcise the ghosts. The monotony of those empty days was somehow comforting. In the morning, I'd shower in the dim light, comb my hair, then watch the news with the volume muted. Sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I caught my reflection in the mirror, recognized that calm posture. And I knew my older self was gone. This was the new David, colder but possibly more real. On the third day, I drove back to the house. She was there, waiting, maybe hoping for a reprieve. But I wasn't there to talk. I went to our bedroom, packed my clothes, took my laptop and personal things. She stood in the hallway, arms wrapped around herself, trembling. At one point, she whispered, "You don't have to do this. We can go to therapy. We can talk." She paused, tears welling. I love you." I turned, forcing myself to meet her eyes. "Love," I echoed, letting the word hang in the silence. Then I repeated a phrase she once told me when we had a small fight about trust. "A person who loves doesn't hide in corner rooms kissing someone else." That was all. Her face crumpled. I had no more words to give. I walked out, loaded my car, and left. Later, I heard from a mutual friend that she'd been seen with Arthur again, though she apparently looked miserable. Maybe they found comfort in each other, or maybe he was just another habit for her. I didn't care. My bond to her was severed. Weeks turned into months. The legal process was straightforward, though every step felt like nails hammered into a coffin. At each signing, each official stamp, I felt both relief and a sting of regret for the dream that died. She tried to contact me once, emailing about her desperate attempt to fix things. I responded briefly, instructing her to send all communication through the lawyers. I sometimes wondered if I'd done the right thing by humiliating her publicly. I knew it was cruel, but I also felt it was the only way for me to reclaim my dignity. She'd chosen to betray me, so I cut out that betrayal in front of everyone. It was a final lesson. I am not a fool. When the day came that she officially moved out, I visited the house. The furniture was half gone, her personal items removed. Old photo frames lay face down on the shelves, pictures of us smiling in better times. I didn't bother to pick them up. I turned on the light in the living room, noticing her shadow across the wall as she carried the last box out. That image lingered. Her silhouette, elongated and alone. She paused at the threshold, maybe waiting for me to say something. I just stood there, arms folded. Eventually, she left without a word. The silence afterwards was suffocating, but also a relief. I sank onto the couch, letting the quiet envelop me. That's when a memory bubbled up. A time she told me, "One day, you might not need me, and I won't know what to do." I almost laughed at the irony. She was right. I no longer needed her, and she had no idea how to handle it. Life moved on. In the months that followed, I changed jobs, relocated to a smaller place in Boston. I didn't speak of her to my friends, though a few asked. Some gave me pitying glances. Others expressed shock or anger on my behalf. I appreciated their concern, but I was done retelling the story. The details lived in my memory. She was part of my history, not my future. And still, late at night, I found myself confronted by questions about trust, about love, about whether I could ever let another person get close. Betrayal does that. It scars you. But it also teaches you what you can survive. Now I know I can stand on my own. Sometimes I recall the swirl of water in that motel toilet, the ring sinking away, the final flush of our vows. It's a symbolic image that never really fades. I told her once, "I'm not the man you used to know." And I meant it. The old me would have raged or begged, tried to salvage us. The new me took a scalpel to our marriage and dissected it with surgical precision, leaving nothing but the bones. Maybe that makes me cold. Maybe it makes me pragmatic. But I refuse to be destroyed by her betrayal. I still see glimpses of her face in old photos or in my mind's eye. Sometimes I remember the softness in her voice from the early years, the nights we laughed as if we'd discovered a secret. But then I recall that hidden hallway at the corporate event, the way she moaned against his lips, and it wipes out any nostalgia. My vengeance was final, my heart made of stone for that moment. People ask if I regret not giving her a chance to explain, to mend what was broken. But I'll always answer the same. Once you see the rot, you can't unsee it. You can't reorder decayed pieces into something that pretends to be fresh. She killed our foundation the moment she let him inside her life, in secret, in that intimate way. I simply performed the autopsy. The day the divorce was finalized, I walked away from the courthouse, stepping into the midday sun. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth on my face, and realized I was free. I might carry the memory of her betrayal, but it wouldn't chain me to her. In the distance, I heard the sound of traffic, of life continuing. I inhaled deeply. Then I exhaled, releasing the last wisps of illusions. So here I am, telling you this. Many men think the hardest part is the anger or the heartbreak. But the true challenge is mastering yourself, to do what you have to do and remain clear-minded, even if it means using her own words against her, even if it means letting the ring swirl down the drain. No screaming, no broken dishes, just a silent, methodical unraveling of everything she thought she could hold on to. She once told me, "Your calm is scarier than any tantrum." Now I understand what she meant. Calm is final. Calm is unstoppable. It's not an act of spontaneity, but the result of decisions, each one hammered into place by the bloaterage of betrayal. I sometimes wonder if her shadow still feels that chill from the night I left her at the holiday party, humiliated in front of everyone. Maybe she still thinks back to that quiz event, or that certificate for psychiatric help, ironic and cruel. Perhaps she sees me in her mind, stepping away while she's calling my name. In my quieter moments, I pity her, but pity doesn't last long. The memory of her tangled in Arthur's arms ensures that. You can ask me if I still believe in love. Maybe I do, in some distant, cautious sense. But if you're waiting for me to say I'll open my heart again, like I once did, you'll be disappointed. That kind of naive trust died with the ring I flushed away. The shadow of that final swirl follows me, reminding me that illusions are ephemeral, that not all pain is visible on the surface, and that sometimes you must become the cold, controlled embodiment of betrayal's consequence. As I left the house for the last time, I remember the shape of her figure across the threshold, the line of sunlight falling behind me. Now her shadow was longer, because I'd taken my light with me. I was no longer the man she once knew, probably never the man she truly needed. But none of that matters. I'm free. And that, in the end, is all that's left to say.